Thank you guys, and welcome to the next episode for our podcast. Today we are going to talk about the constructed tournament that just happened for March. It's the Digital Monthly Championship where you have a chance to win $500, which you do have to fill out a W-9 for if you do win. And I'm going to have Travis talk a little bit about Tom's deck, as he's done a deck tech recently on it.
All right, so the short version here is this is the Epic Digital Monthly Championship. This is an invite-only game for the top placers, everything else. The format of each month, if you look on the website, everything else does rotate. So March was constructed. I believe next month might be Dark Draft. So this is one of those things where they are, if you want to repeatedly win, you need to be good across the board in a lot of formats. Now, if you want to see the same stuff we're looking at, you go onto your play online, then you go up to that little bracketed thing. It's the furthest left on the top right side of your screen. It either looks like a really weird alien symbol, or if you know what brackets are, it's a bracketed tournament thing. It'll have on the right side will be ended constructed invite only, and then below it will be rounds info, because it'll say, hey, here's the winner, so on and so forth. Hit rounds info, it'll pull up a listing. Now, if you hit copy deck, it'll bring up the deck list. If you want to take this list, the easy way is to press export and then eventually back out whenever you get around and go to an empty deck slot and you hit import. Boom, there's a deck. Just make sure you save it underneath whatever name you want to save it under, but that's how you get there. Now, all that wonderful stuff said and done. I was looking at Tom Sorensen's deck, and the big thing here, and I said in our deck tech, it is something that is both familiar but very different. I've been playing it all day. I might be about 50-50 with it. I've played a few things that felt like Mirror Match. I've played a few things that felt like they were inspired by it. I'm seeing a lot more Deadly Raid, which, I mean, that already was sort of showing up with these good Sage token decks. We're now seeing, because obviously he won, and they make it very easy for you as an app user to just port this deck right over. The areas I want to point out, there are no board wipes in this deck. There is no discard hate in this deck. So technically, in a wide open, free range, meta like I keep, you do not have very specific hate. This is a deck that requires skill, timing, and there are many times I found myself like, oh, I'm going to win, and I'm ready for this Deadly Raid attack. If they have their one gold open, you don't play the Deadly Raid until they spend their gold or whatever, because there's a wave of transformation coming, and they did that. That happened before my Deadly Raid went off. There are other times where if you have your, I was going to call them shrouded, untargetables like Steel Golem or whatever, I've had a Sea Titan, a single Sea Titan with Deadly Raid. They were at 11. There was nothing they can do to stop it. That's why I really like this deck. It has not utility, but has many different angles of attack. If you know how to play this flexible offense, defense, when are you on your heels? When are you just laying low? When should you go in and go right at them? For example, the check pass of, I don't spend my gold because I'm going first and I throw it over to you. This deck, if you have the ability to play Juggernaut with loyalty, I actually feel like that's a pretty strong opening play. Just being like, look, I'm not going to play this check pass game. I'm coming in with this Juggernaut. Now, is that always going to win? No, but the option's there. The deck has a lot of earmarks for very similar ideas we see across the grid. We see Surprise attacking Kong, Sea Titans there. I don't often see Steel Golem in lists that do extremely well. I played a few times in free range, and it does well here and there, but with the ability to surprise attack it at the end of your opponent's turn, if you can bait them out into tapping down their board at the end of their turn with an Ice Drake, comes back to yours, you either attack in or they clear the board, and you just come crashing the steel, see if that works. Or if you get a Steel Golem off a surprise attack at the end of their turn, comes back to yours, you play Deadly Raid, you're coming in for 15. There aren't a lot of answers, and you'll know, and unfortunately, this is a deck that favors someone who can predict what's in an opponent's deck. Now, obviously, you don't need to, have special abilities, but pay attention to the reveals off loyalty. Pay attention to the reveals off Misguide Herald, because Misguide Herald is definitely very popular. I would argue it's probably in 1 out of 3 decks, if not more. Realistically, it's probably in 1 out of 2, maybe even higher than that. Look at the cards that are revealed off of Misguide Herald and go, oh, here are the types of board wipes they're running. What factions are they in? If they're in evil, you don't have, be like, all right, well, they have zombie apocalypse that can be played, on my turn. But good has a couple of board wipes that will hit an untargetable. The deck, it's a lot of fun, but I will say you have to change your mindset. Like the number of people that run out Angel of the Gate to block, let's say, Draka, or to block a strafing dragon. Well, many times these decks have Rage or Go Wild or Lash. You don't actually need to block with Angel of the Gate. You can if you need to, but if they're not going to drop you into um, uh, direct damage range, sometimes it's better just to put it in at the end of their turn after they spend their gold and slowly gain that 5 life back. Here, Second Wind is probably definitely put to very heavy use because you have no discard pile interaction. You should be recycling at literally almost every turn, unless you're trying to play around them playing Army of the Apocalypse or Zombie Apocalypse, both of which care about the champions in your discard. Unless you're trying to play around those, you just aggressively recycle. Siren Song, that's a card you have to know when you have to cycle it. Vanishing, same thing. Warrior Golem, which is it's a free Sage, 4 offense, 2 defense, loyalty 2. You can give it Blitz. That's kind of important every now and then, not as much. Whenever it's put in the discard from anywhere, you get to recycle. Save if you know they're playing Thought Pluckers. Leave this thing in your hand. Put it out there as a chump blocker if they're starting to play all these Demon and Xanos builds. Trade this guy for a Demon token and recycle. That's fine. Like I said, there's a lot of familiar cards. This really does read like, if you would take probably the top 50 cards from Epic, this runs probably at least 10 plus of those in either 3s or 2s. There are no singletons. Helion's a ton of fun in this deck. But this deck, there is no straightforward blueprint. Like this is almost like a college level, like an intro college course. You need to be guided in, well, here are the good responses. Are they trying to bait you? Are you trying to bait them? When should you be playing Helion? There are so many conditions that this is a very fun deck, but it's not a straightforward deck. Can it win out of nowhere? Absolutely, but you have to set up that nowhere, to keep that analogy going. I really like this deck, but putting my time in with this, I can definitely say that, as always, Tom has his finger on the meta, and he always likes to come in from just a little bit off in the peripheral. It's such a beautifully crafted deck. I mean, obviously, I'm in admiration, but at the same time, now that the deck list exists, I'm not expecting to see him play it ever again. Like it always just seems to be like his thing is he comes up with these wacky lists because he came. If you watch some of the other deck techs we have up, he is accredited with some of these other lists that definitely come in from left field. But then there's something else going on. Like he's not running in with a Kark list, which we will definitely get to in a moment. But this isn't. While it has Shadow Imp, it's not just a Shadow Imp deck. While it has, surprise attack and everything else, it's not your typical Wild Sage deck, splash good. It has Resurrection, a card that's really not well represented, and learning how to use Resurrection in this is not always obvious. There are times where you're like, oh, I'll just keep my gold, but then it comes to the end of their turn, you go, they haven't killed anything, I'm going to draw 2 cards. So I really like this deck. I really want to grind more with this deck, but its pick up and play might be frustrating for some people who just go, "Oh, this just won, so clearly it's the best deck." Well, it's also piloted by a very good player, so that's my opinion.
No, and that definitely makes a lot of sense whenever you're looking at it in the full spectrum of what actually happened. And you can definitely see that there was a very changed version of the meta from what we were able to see as far as going back into October as the last posted lists were up. And then being able to go in and see decks like this and have a good idea of, hey, I can go and see what was being ran at a tournament level. Maybe that inspires you to go and build something different, go further, and try building something that's different and new. Like one of the decks that came in second place was going on a dragon build, where it was running
Oh,
Thundaris.
you're going for the Tap Daddy one?
Yep, that's
Okay,
number
all right.
two.
I'm just making sure that I have the right list open. So
No
go ahead.
worries. Yeah, so they're running the Thundaris as a one of. They're running Gold Dragon to deal with, giving righteousness to the few guys that you're going to have. Silver Dragon to deal with tokens. But you're looking at a lot of ones and twos, where it's kind of like digging for the answer that it really needs. And then you start getting into where it went wild and start bringing in Brachiosaurus so that it basically gets to play it for free and then play out something else on top of it. You're looking at some mixed matched answer cards by having Draca's Fire as a one of, having Fires the Rebellion as a one of, having Hurricane as a one of, where you usually see those more in a Wild Sage pairing of twos and threes as opposed to just a one of in the hopes that you get it to clear out your opponent's board.
Well, let me ask you, because this is my opinion on this. Do you think, because we talked about, pillar cards or build around me cards, this is another list that has Misguide Herald. Now, Misguide Herald really can all but be slapped into just about every deck. Do you think the reason there are so many one-ofs are so that they do have that random answer, but they also throw people off? Because that's why I would run something. Why eventually you and I need to fix that Singleton deck. Is it's you in the truest sense of the term unpredictable, not in the sense that you can't predict it, but your opponent doesn't actually know the card count. Like, for example, this deck only runs 2 Kong, when almost every deck that runs Kong runs 3 up. It runs 1 Flashfire. It runs 1 Lash. It runs 1 Thundaris, because for a little while there was a few Dragon decks running around. And if you see Thundaris, like, oh, this guy is a schmuck. They're playing this Dragon deck, and you go, that's a nice thought there. I only run 1 of them. So have fun figuring out the rest of this list. That's my opinion.
No, what it does is it's going to add consistency to this type of deck, where you're trying to get out your wild creatures that are real heavy, and they're going to be your heavy hitters, what's really going to continue moving you forward. But if you're able to drop that and, let's say, get the Thundaris that ends up boosting your entire team because you've landed a Draca Dragon Tyrant on the field, or Draca's Enforcer, or any of these other cards like Strafing Dragon, and you have this board already built that's kind of really intimidating, but you still need that extra edge or that extra piece that's going to allow you to continue moving forward. It definitely gets you there by running Misguide Herald and allowing you to really come out of nowhere, or to take those cards that are in your hand, and maybe you had to reveal something. Maybe this is what you drew and you had nothing else left other than reaching a little bit further. It getting basically replacing itself by putting something better on the board, and especially if you hit like a Raging T-Rex and are able to draw 2 cards off of it, or get down like the Gold Dragon where you're going to start getting righteousness and start getting your life total back into a manageable position. It has a lot of answers, and it seems more like it's silver bullets in the answers.
Well, I mean, there could be silver bullets, but I'm really trying to pick apart this list, and maybe we should try and start finding some of these people.
Oh,
But
it'd definitely be an
just for anyone
interesting
who,
thing.
well, yeah, no, but let's play out the scenario. I'm going to run some numbers. So in Wild, we have 3 Draca, 3 Draca's Enforcer, 3 Strafing Dragons. That's 9 dragons already. Now, you add Silver Dragon to fight the tokens, because demon tokens they seem to be coming up more and more in some of these control builds with Rift Summoner with Raxa. So that's kind of a silver bolt, but it's also a dragon. It also replaces itself. So we're up to 10. Gold Dragon. Yes, it gives the whole team righteousness, but it also has Blitz. meaning it can come out of nowhere, come swinging in, and that thing, when it hits, not you're gaining 6. That's actually a 12-point swing. I know for everyone at home that's complicated, 6 points. But you have that. And now the single Thundarus, I've seen some lists, these dragon lists where it's like multiple Thundarus. You're like, oh man, they're unbeatable. But this also runs 3 final task. Now, between Misguided Herald and Final Task, your ability to get some of these bodies in play, and if they don't clear out your discard, that Thundarus can be doing so much heavy lifting. Thundarus being unbanishable puts you a slight leg up against the removal from good. It being a 15 on the rear means the removal from wild is all but useless. Feeding Frenzy is about the only one that I can think of, and obviously that's a 2-card combination there. So it's Thundarus is only really kind of weak against Sage with their transform abilities, and against Evil with their very clear just destroy. As a one of, when it shows up, it could ruin this game. Now, right below that are 2 Brave Squire. Now, I remember saying previously that I haven't seen this card, and I know it wasn't because I said that. But now, since I have said that, I've been seeing Brave Squire show up more and more. Brave Squire is a 0-cost good event. You may target a champion, put a human token in play, then give it or the target +5 attack and unbreakable this turn. This card has 3 major uses. One, you can just make a chump blocker out of nowhere, 6 power, take down a decent sized body from your opponent. Okay. But giving +5 attack out of nowhere, we go to assign damage. Right before assign damage, I put down 5 extra attack. But if you say play Gold Dragon, you play this before you attack, or right before your opponent gets priority. You are boosting up how many points of life you're getting back on the Gold Dragon. You already are running. Where is it? Brachiosaurus. Brachiosaurus with breakthrough. I'm trying to think. See if there's anyone else with breakthrough or unblockable. No. But also Brachiosaurus. Brachiosaurus with breakthrough, making it both unbreakable and raising its power means it's coming in for 13. It can't just be shot by Evil. If it's being it's not just going to be chump blocked. So it has its uses as a 2 count, and from my own test with other decks, 2 feels like a pretty solid. You don't want to see it all the time, but when you do see it, it's not bad. It does have some discard hate with Guilt Demon, but not much. Lesson learned to get back some of these events. I mean, because it has like 1 hurricane, whatever, Fires of Rebellion. You can rebuy that. You can rebuy surprise attack. And this thing does even have Feeding Frenzy. Like it feels like it's able. It's the classic, race car analogy where they're able to feel like they're driving in both lanes, but at the same time they're just moving around you. If you took literally just the top 2 between Tom and this Tat Daddy, I would argue that these are skilled players that are playing decks that have had their numbers tweaked, that also have the ability to manipulate the expectations of their opponent, which, I'm not saying that this is a giant mind game, but when you're trying to decide whether or not you should spend your gold before your opponent, or, did they misclick? Did they accidentally check pass? It could be a trap, or they could have misclicked, and you have to try and read that situation. If you went up against this second place deck, I'd be like, oh, it's just a wild deck. And you see some Sage, oh, it's just wild Sage. And they have cards in every color, and the cards from good are not what I would expect. They would come out, I'd be confused. I would start holding guys back. If someone plays Thundarus on me, I would just sit there, scratch my head, going, now I'm actually worried that this is a dragon deck and they just were running. But that's, again, that's my opinion.
No, but the other part that they did throw in there, and it is a little bit sneaky, is that you're looking at 4 cards that give breakthrough to the creatures that you're going to be doing this. So not only are they getting a +4/+4 and breakthrough, or a +4/+0 breakthrough with the 1 damage and having an ability to recall, but if you have that plus the Thundarus, and the amount of combinations that allows to happen, whether it's on Gold Dragon or whether it's on one of the 13 dragons in the deck, that easily allows you to hit for 17 to 20 damage and basically drop your opponent from almost out of nowhere.
Well, I'm also looking. Brachiosaurus and Kong are the only two bodies in the deck that are on the ground, and Brachiosaurus has breakthrough. So technically, if you're going strictly from a vanilla stats approach, Kong is actually the weakest. Now, obviously, we all know Kong's amazing, but this plays the air game. This plays semi-evasive. You also have Smash and Burn, which I have a love-hate relationship with. I do think it's a skill tester card where the people, when they play it and they play it, it's a good card. Smash and Burn, you almost don't mind discarding because Smash and Burn is a 1 gold wild event. Target champion gets +5 attack, +5 defense, draw 2 cards. I've seen people burn this at the end of my turn just so they can get 2 cards. Okay, whatever. But then, if it's in your discard pile, whenever you play a 1 gold wild card, you may banish this card. If you do, deal 6 damage to a champion. Why this matters, and this literally just happened to me a game, Hurricane. With Smash and Burn, you cast Hurricane, you can actually kill a Kong. You can actually kill Thundarus. It allows Hurricane or some of these other, direct damage. It could either be a divided extra 6 damage. It could help clear out small guys. It can also allow some of these go wider ones to, deal more damage. It allows your Strafing Dragon to deal 5 damage to a target, and then with Smash and Burn being banished, you can deal 6 either to the same target or 6 to a different target. In this deck, especially with how much evasion you have with Brachiosaurus, or even just say Guilt Demon coming out of nowhere with Blitz and it's a 0 cost. You send in, Guilt Demon, and they weren't expecting it. You throw Smash and Burn, you're hitting for 8 out of nowhere, plus getting 2 cards, this, that, the other thing. This is a very offensive-minded deck, but also, if you look through this list, the only board wipes that are here, there is 1 Hurricane, there is 1 Flash Fire. Otherwise, everything is either pinpoint or you're talking about combat to combat. I don't know if we'll use the term pro, because obviously this is the invitation only. I don't know if the pros are moving away from sweepers or if they're just saying, hey, it's more like, I guess more of a skill testing, more of a mental mind game where you're not running catch-alls. You're just trying to inch your way across the finish line versus slap the guy around and then come in for the easy win. They seem like it on the surface, like you just put down Thundarus and win. Well, try and actually do that in practicality.
No, it definitely is that, and to get the invitation, you do end up having to win a golden ticket, which is either having the top of the arena for most wins or having the most or longest streak. So you have to do those to earn the gold ticket, and then if you've won these before, first place ended up getting 4, second place ends up getting 3, third place ends up getting 2, and fourth place ends up getting their gold ticket back. So those end up having a ability to allow you to continue in without having to play the arena much more. But that is where you're going to be testing this deck out and playing against those players that want to go at that same level.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a weird secondary environment where clearly whenever arena comes around constructed, that means they are definitely probably hanging out in there more during that week than the other weeks, and I have nothing wrong with that. I actually think the rotating arena format is probably better overall for the health of the game, because if you're sick of constructed, just wait 1 week. You don't have to keep in one format. Plus, obviously, you do have the free range events. But if you really do like one format, it's going to be seeded much more, because obviously some people aren't going to wait that month for constructed to come back. But let's move on to where are we at? Atlanta's list.
Yeah,
Or did you want
Atlanta's
to talk about
list
someone
is
else first?
going to end up running the Kark list, which is going to be a copy of third and fourth place, both having a Kark style build.
Well, the reason I want to bring up Atlanta I've done a deck tech, and apparently I got it wrong. I want to emphasize that I did. I put in the priestess of Angeline, and it actually was the priest of Cal. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up, neither of them are in this. They've been replaced with Watchful Gargoyle. Brandon and I had actually a very healthy little back and forth about which of the zeros we like better. And I said I like the priestess. And he's like, oh, well, you can gain anywhere from 0 to 6 life, whereas Priest of Kalinor can protect your guys from an explosion. Proactively, you do it on your turn, follow that up, but you also always gain the 4th. Well, here, Watchful Gargoyle, what it's going to do is serve multiple purposes. One, it has ambush. So if they decide they're going to come in with Draka, which I swear Draka is probably the top 5 played cards right now, just by the number of times I see it all the time, you can still, after Draka attacks and deals 3 damage to all your team, you still can put in Watchful Gargoyle and block. It also has Recycle. So the one thing that I liked about the Priestess over the Priest was the ability to stay in cards. And let me just tell you, and I'm not proclaiming to be a very skilled Kark player, but Kark is one of my 3 go-to lists when I'm just testing things out, or I want to try and bump my next 2 wins to the next level. This list it is definitely a modified and recorded last year. It has the usual. It has a ridiculous number of board clears. It has lesson learned. It still is running Consume, the 0 cost evil event that deals 3 damage to a target, gains you 3 life. It's not an exact mirror image. It upped Marcus from 2 count to a 3 count. It's running a single quell, which I think is also the fact that you can because the fast on your opponent's turn board clears from good don't deal with tokens, or half of them do. So Quell at least can deal with tokens on your opponent's turn, and it'll net you a card. Why that would matter is it dovetails with Wave Transformation. So you can. I mean, I know it takes 2 cards to clear out stuff, but it's still there. But most of the other stuff seems kind of stock from the previous Atlanta list. But I wanted to cite that if you were really into playing Kark and you wanted to play it as a grindy deck, this one basically wins with Kark. It is not trying to win by dealing damage to your opponent. It's there to win with Kark. It adds Frantic Digging, which is good because it wants to stay in cards. It adds Watchful Gargoyle, because again, it can now block these huge airborne lists. If you look at Tat Daddies, that thing is probably well over 90% in the skies. You can still block that, because that's most of what Kark is. They just want to gain some life and then gain some life. That's all it wants to do, is just gain some life. And blocking Draka is basically like gaining 9. It's not life you have to regain, because once you get to about 50, Kark is very much a legitimate threat. It can come in and take them out. Anything to add on that, Brandon? I mean, I know I rambled about Kark, but I've played it way much. I've played the lands list a bunch.
No, it is one of those things that after we finished up with the cutter last week, we were sitting talking, and he did bring up the point that usually when you're sitting there and you're looking at your hand and what you're trying to manage is that you're managing 3 different aspects of the game. Now, when you go over to Kark, you're kind of taking and lowering the priority level so that you're really only dealing with 2 different aspects of what's going on in the game. And he was mentioning that it was a great deck to really begin getting into Constructed with over something like Wild Sage, because you're thinking less about what you're trying to get to, in that you're not managing everything at the same time. All you're really managing here is continuing to raise your life total and continuing to have cards in your hand. Because the deck is really designed to deal with all the threats at one time. So it doesn't really care too much about taking 6 or 8 or 9 damage a turn, as long as it can manage that with the life gain of getting roughly 10 back a turn. And the other big part to this is that it's increased its inner peace from 2 to 3, which versus the mirror match is one of the cards that you're kind of racing to get to, because the Kark versus Kark mirror match is really dependent upon how fast you can get your life total to 60. Because it's not going to be a timeout battle, it's not going to be a damage battle. You're really going to be racing to who can get there first. So it
It
looks
is,
like
and
it's planning for that mirror match.
sorry, I
No,
was
no
running
worries.
numbers. Um, the changes from last year in Atlanta, and we'll talk about the fourth place list, the one you were hinting as another card. It has lowered its count of evil cards. The current list, the one that's just from March, only has Drain Essence and Zombie Apocalypse. So it took out actual Apocalypse. It took out Corpse Monger to add in these, extra good cards, to add in these extra Sage. I'm just staring at. I'm like eyeball symbols. They added eyeball symbols. But then in fourth place, WWW, they take a much different approach, and different in the sense that it's still a Kark deck, but it has Angel of the Gate, it has Noble Unicorn as their draw engine, it has Royal Escort to kind of confuse wild players as to what they're doing, but then it runs Plague, which it's a slightly more flexible Apocalypse, but it can also take out tokens, so I can see why that's there. Um, I personally do not like the changes in the WWW list, but that is strictly preference. If you like a more proactive, because this list, the fourth place list, the WWW, could win via damage. Between Noble Unicorn, Angel of the Gate, you actually can put up a fight. You throw in Royal Escort, to kind of give them untargetable. You can, legitimately fight in the air. It definitely seems like it's probably better set up to fight Wild Sage, whereas Atlanta's list, to me, feels like it is more prepared for the evil matchups. That's just the way it feels to me. And obviously, without more testing, I really can't get that. But I've seen these variations in Kark. I don't know what the right answer is. I know what the right answer is for me. I like the Kark as my only win condition. Not that's my plan A and there's a plan B. It is they are all in on if you somehow find a way to shut down Kark, this list doesn't work. But at the same time, it's hyper focused where I've pulled off a turn 3 win with Atlanta's old Kark list from mid 2019, because it doesn't mess around with, but I have these blockers, and no. It just puts down big chunks of life to be regained. But that's, my look at things. You want to go straight down to the next one, or do you want to pick out something more specifically, or
No,
because
let's
obviously
move
this?
on to the next list for Pedro.
So Pedro fifth place. I don't really know where all the brackets are. They do have the numbers to the side there. I would have to look more intently on what those numbers strictly mean. So we're just calling it in the order they're listed. So the fifth one it is one of the most wild, heavy / Sage decks I've ever seen. It only has 9 Sage cards, which means it has 51 wild cards. So it is definitely a wild, dash lowercase Sage deck. What are your opinions on that list?
Really, it's only running Sage to increase its card draw. So you're looking at the Misguided Herald, which is going to net you one of the top 5 off the top, which if you net into Bronchiosaurus, and then you have something in hand like a Kong that can come down and really just throw out damage, or if you're using that to throw out your Raging T-Rex and have the ability to draw 2, basically it just wants to continue drawing into the wild cards and really just keep pushing forward. It's like a
So would you?
single-minded attack.
Sorry. So would you? Because if you remember our old days playing other games, this almost feels like if you wanted to call this accelerated wild, in the sense that everything that they're getting from the Sage chunk is just to keep the wild going. There is no all the cards they're running. So let's just go through them. Ancient Chant keeps cards in hand. Misguided Herald digs deeper. Frantic Digging, well, it's in the name. It shows you for 0 cost. It'll show you 2 new cards. So but also Frantic Digging pairs very well with Smash and Burn. If you're actually getting around to that. But if you're looking at like this, it really is only using Sage to make sure it keeps that, very critical 4+ cards in hand, in my opinion.
No, it's definitely doing that. It can also combo the Frantic Digging off the Ancient's Chant, so that when you recycle, not only are you drawing a card from the Frantic Digging, not only are you drawing from the recycle, but you're also drawing a third card if you're using that recycle to get rid of the Ancient Chant, thus letting you net 3 for 0, and you may have discarded the Ancient Chant as the card for discard. If you do that and end up picking up 3 wild cards, which allows you to then trigger a loyalty ability of, let's say, Raging T-Rex, you've possibly drew 5 cards off of one turn, which is a
That's pretty.
significant dig, especially when the one of the things you need to focus on in the game is keeping cards in hand. You're talking about spending 1 gold in a turn to dig 5 cards deeper, now have answers to your opponent, and that may not be the play that you end up trying to get, but the fact that you can maybe hit that draw 3 off of just throwing the Ancient Chance away by recycling is an interesting thought and a concept to go with that not everyone's going to notice or really realize is happening until it's too late.
I think this is a very beginner-friendly deck, and I did preface this before. I just want to read that doesn't mean that it's meant for people who have no skill. To take any deck into an invite-only tournament, you've clearly done something right. But you look at this list is very well set. It only runs 2 Scaros, which is the Loyalty X Hound, but between Scaros, Fire Shaman, if anyone's ever been on the other side of Fire Shaman Brachiosaurus, Fire Shaman is a free 3/2 wild, sits there whenever you spend, you pay a 1 gold wild card, deals 3 damage. Well, in Brachiosaur, you'll do that twice, which means it can deal 3 points to a target, 3 points to either the same or a different target, and that clears out some of those smaller control lists, the ones that are Misguided Herald, Thought Plucker. You can fire right back, take out their team, and also advance your board state. This is I don't want to get too hung up on it because it's only one of them, but it does run Hunting Raptors. It does run Fire Spirit as a one of. It runs cards that are occasionally good. It does run Ankylosaurus, which is a free 7/7 breakthrough. When it comes in, you could pay your gold for the turn and draw a card. So it can either be an additional body, or if you want to fish out a low-level turn 1 play, that's not the worst thing to do to stay back in business. It does run Rage. It runs the classic Wolf, but it also runs Flame Spike, which is 2 damage to any target, no Wolf token, and Recycle. This really does feel like all it wants to do is turn its guys sideways. It wants to clear out the side of the board. It wants to put fire upside their head, and the very reserved Sage selection. It is just cards. That's all it is. And obviously, how many people have ever been on the opposite side of Surprise Attack, Misguided Herald? That feels real bad at the end of your turn when they put out 2+ bodies, and you're like, oh, this next attack is gonna hurt.
Well, the best part about that is not only is it 2 bodies out on the field, it's still the same card count in hand, because you ended up drawing a card off of the surprise attack, and thus throwing out that Misguided Herald, and then getting another body, so you're netting cards, which is like a draw 2, which seems to be the focus of the deck, is really hitting that I want to draw 2 almost every turn.
Well, it also runs Savage Uprising, which I keep recounting because some of these are more obscure if you don't really grind out some of these decks. 1 gold, deal 5 damage to target player and draw a card, or deal 9 damage to each one. Now, between the Ankylosaurus they have that, is a 0, so is the Fire Shaman. Arguably, you could clear out their side of the board, but as you said, it definitely feels like it wants to be dealing damage, but constantly keep their hand at least half stocked. And, there's not really much more I'm going to say about that. If you any parting thoughts, I mean, if I had to pick a list to give someone to play tomorrow, that's probably one of my top picks, just because it's not that it's a simple strategy. It's a very direct strategy. It's a very focused strategy. And just like, look, beat them down keep your handful, and then beat them down if they're still breathing.
No, it definitely is a great idea to, if you're not sure how to start playing some of the more complicated decks, the game plan with that deck is to continue moving forward. And that is continue turning sideways, continue pushing, and if you get wiped, well, now you have fodder for the recycle and continue moving forward. It really doesn't care about the wipes so much. It's about every time that you have a body on the board that you're constantly putting your opponent at a threat. And more than likely, you're going to end up directing a lot of that at their life total. Just because they're able to block doesn't necessarily mean that that block is going to be anything of value to them. It may just be that false sense of security that ends up killing them.
Well, one of the things before we move on to the next list, what's really nice about this tournament table that they have, they, excuse me, they list the number of points that the players have won. By the fact that Tom has 15, I'm going to assume it might have been a 5-rounder. I mean, it could have been more. It doesn't really say that.
It's 5 rounds. Round 6 was Tad Daddy versus Tom Epic.
Okay.
Round 4 was Atlanta versus Tad Daddy.
I think that means it must have been double limb, and Tom must have lost at least one round in there.
Well, rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all Swiss.
Okay.
And then round 5 is single elimination, basically cut to top 4.
Okay. All right. So it's Swiss with a break to top. Okay.
Yep.
Well, so anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up, the second column here is games won as first player. Now, Tom has won 3 as first player. Everyone else below him, the max is 2. Very often for some of these decks, it's a tie somewhere between 2 and 0. There are a few 1s, but there's more 2s than 1s. I think to read from that, going first almost kind of feels like a disadvantage just because you have to either check pass or have a very aggressive start. And if you have an aggressive start, you're at 4 cards and they're at 5 with their gold open. So, but that's just my interpretation of the readings. But that also means you look at what Pedro's deck was, how quick that thing could capitalize on going second. If they were allowed to be check pass, like, all right, well, I'll just, if you check pass and you don't do anything on your turn, you basically, hey, you're the first player now, player 2, only you get 6 cards. Oh, well, okay, now I'm just going to beat you down. Or I played a draw 2 on your turn, player 1. It's, so, anyway, where to next?
Well, just as a little bit of a heads up is that the ties are broken using the first non-equal item in the ordered list. So most points. No, this is the list now. Is most points. Then it goes most opponent points. Most games is first player. Most games or most seconds left, and fewest buys. So your breakdown is left to right as far as tiebreakers are concerned. So if for some reason that they were both at 12, then it goes to opponent points. So that's where, let's say, if Tom didn't beat Tad Daddy and they were tied, the 48 versus the 42 would have been a significant break.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's one of that's how they're using their tiebreakers and why all these things are important. But so we're gonna look at Bean Beats here as number 6.
Oh, Benny Beats.
Yep.
So this is another wild heavy deck. It splashes for 9 cards in Evil, 9 cards in Sage. What sticks out to you about this in the sense of just discussion?
The real big change to this is it's running Wave of Transformation, Amnesia, and it's dealing a lot with what your opponent is having on the board. Almost in the sense that it's trying to clear the threats that your opponent puts down on the board instead of having to really worry about getting their life total to a point that you can burn away at them instead.
Well, it does have 3 hunting raptors, so it keeps the ambush theme up. If anyone's played against any wild Sage decks, the Wave of Transformation at the end of your opponent's turn, turning everything into 2/2 wolves, followed by your turn of Draka, and then Draka clearing it out or using Flash Fire. But what's interesting, they only have 2 Flash Fire and only have 1 Draco. So that's clearly not their biggest concern. One of the other reasons to say now, so given the cards pool and everything else, on your opponent's turn, board clears that are unconditional, Wave of Transformation. There is no untransformable. Those cards don't exist. So this will hit any unbanishable, any unbreakable. It will handle it. Now you could argue, why aren't you running Reset? Well, putting Strafing Dragon and stuff back into your opponent's hand, or for Kark, putting some of those good cards back into your opponent's hand doesn't always seem to win. This might be a concession to the expectations of playing against playing against Strafing Dragon, playing against Kark. But I do find it a little interesting. Sage cards are just Ancient Chant to Staying Gas. Okay, Wave of Transformation, there's your board clear. Amnesia, there's your discard hate. That's all from Sage. From Evil, Drain Essence, which really is one of the best cards. It kills Draka dead, gets you your life points back, pretty good. Final Task, okay, that will let you revitalize, especially if you killed off some of their guys. It might let you get a timely, tribute trigger. But then for its zeros, instead of anything that hates a discard pile, its pinpoint is Rax's Curse, which is a free event. You play it, you get a demon token, and then you have to blow up a 0. I've in the list that I've played it in, it's usually played in control lists. I don't see it often in aggressive lists. So just from the Evil and the Sage cards, this seems to be teetering more towards a mid-range / control, because this doesn't have a lot of blitz bodies. It has Draco, Hunting Raptors, which you don't attack with unless you absolutely need to, Strafing Dragon, but that thing's just period good. It has Spore Beast, but again, if you're attacking with that, the game's already gone weird, or you're playing Kark. If you're playing Kark, you'll attack with it. But a lot of this it feels like bigger plays, but it also feels like you're trying to make these big plays and just be like, look, I have, all these heavy books. What are you going to do about it? And I think that might have been what happened when you realize that having only 3 amnesias, that's not the worst, but the number of times I've seen people cash an amnesia just to see one more card, well, at that point, frantic digging's better. We will see down there, how hating the discard pile is necessary. Rax's Curse, obviously then the argument would be, well, Rax's Curse versus, say, Siren Song, and Siren Song can only be used on your turn, so isn't Rax's Curse better? Yes and no. To me, this feels like this list is assembled versus polished, and I mean that in the most respectful way of the player. Obviously, they're better than me. They got to where they are. But it feels like they just took a bunch of answers, put them into a deck, and basically took almost like the answer key to a test, and then they go, oh, well, there's an essay portion, and you go, well, that's not on my answer key. So, ooh, not good. And I probably wandered with that analogy a little bit, didn't I?
A little bit, but it's not a big deal. A lot of it looks like it's trying to use Final Task to get that finish that it may need, or to be using it to trigger something like Kong a second time. Because you're not looking at too much that allows you to really recoup where you're at.
Yeah, no, you definitely. There's no life. Sorry, I was just going to say there's no life gain. There's Drain Essence. I should read, but getting a second run out of a Strafing Dragon is always ridiculous. Obviously that's probably the best target for your Final Task in this deck. Actually, I think that's about the only. Hunting Raptors. If they're at 4, I can get back Hunting Raptors. It does run 3 Flame Strikes, so it has the ability to burn away. But there's no way to bring back those Flame Strikes, so they're not trying to juggle them. They just run them straight, which is, again, that's perfectly fine. There are 2 Flash Fires to, kind of supplement either the dealing with a bunch of small bodies or to follow up with the Wave of Transformation. But a lot of what I'm looking at with this list, it just feels like because there's no combat tricks, there's no rage. There's Feeding Frenzy. Okay, that means if your guy gets chump blocked, or rather if you chump block, like let's say your Fire Shaman has to block well, the downside is Feeding Frenzy only works on your turn. The good side is it is 0 cost, and it can be a draw too. But it also dovetails nicely with Hunting Raptors, because Hunting Raptors deals the damage directly to the target. Wolf's Bite deals damage directly to the target, but then you are talking spending 2 cards to kill 1 body. Again, it's just I respect where this is. It is probably, I mean, this balance of 9 evil, 9 sage, and 42 wild cards. That's probably one of my favorite breakdowns as far as card counts go. And I know it seems weird to any audience, but it gives you just enough in your 2 supporting colors, but a really nice sized main body. But I'm not as big of a fan of what the main body represents, because it feels like it's a greatest hits album, and that there's no synergy. There's no one play that feels like it's leading into the next. You're just heavy handedly pounding at your opponent. They put down something, you hit it with Kong. You do have the Brachiosaur and the Fire Shaman play. You do have Spore Beast. You do have Surprise Attack. But Surprise Attack without Misguided Herald, and at that point it sounds almost like a liability when I say it like that. But without Misguided Herald, Surprise Attack in this deck, okay, you do get Brachiosaur, you do get the Raging T-Rex, but most of your other bodies have Ambush. So Surprise Attack doesn't feel as devastating to me in this list, because we were talking about it with the Cutter in episode 5. You don't need to build around Surprise Attack, but he made mention of, well, Surprise Attack doesn't go in every list, because the more ambush you have, the less need you have for this. And obviously here, Surprise Attack Kong is a good play, but that feels like that is your best play for Surprise Attack. The same way your best play in the deck for Final Task would either be Kong or it would be another Strafing Dragon. To me, that feels like not enough. Like you almost want to nod, but at the same time, where I would take this list would make it much more dependent on those cards, so that when it doesn't see those cards, you're kind of up a creek. So I guess my opinion is more like I want to add vulnerabilities, but I want to build up its strong side. But it's all wax Wayne, obviously, because we only have 60 cards.
No, I definitely see that, and I do see that there are a lot of options that it can do, especially with the combat tricks of using Spore Beast to end up letting you have some tricks whenever you're going in through Breakthrough, using the Bronchiosaurus. And on top of that, using the Flash Fires to then have the Feeding Frenzy clear out the remainder on the board are a few options there as well. So
But
it's weird just to play the 2 to clear a board when you could have done it more effectively at 1.
that I would agree with that, because that's card inefficiency, and in a game that's so built up on the free plays, are they a threat or are they supplementary? If it takes 2 cards from your hand to kill 1 or 2 of theirs, that doesn't feel like you're really gaining ground, especially in a deck that's not set up to gain that many cards back. You have Ancient Chant, but you don't have all these cantrip bodies. Like the previous one with Pedro, where they had Fire Spirit. Fire Spirit, while I don't like the card that much, it at least draws itself back, so you're not down a card by playing it.
No, I can definitely
But
see that, and I really don't see that there's much more into that deck. It does feel like it is the greatest hits. It does feel like it's trying to get there, but it was more like it was trying to take the safe bet instead of going with something that was maybe a threat of a deck. It was trying to be the answers to what they thought the current threats were.
well, let's take those same exact thoughts, go down one to Oakenshield. I played them a bunch in my first week. They are a good player. They definitely beat me up a bunch. I think, though, I played them mostly in random 30s. But anyway, they have another heavy wild, evil, and sage splash. This time it's only 6 evil cards, 9 sage cards, and then 45 of the wild. Your smaller evil package, single drain essence. That's not the worst. It's not great in every matchup, especially if you're not expecting to see as much wild sage. 3 final task again, okay, but its 2 zeros are 2 little devil, which is a 0 cost 4/4 airborne blitz. So it does add pressure, but I don't know how enthralled I am with that. I mean, if I scroll down, I see that there are 3 Go Wild and 3 Rage. So clearly, this is meant to, in Magic terms, we would have called this a slide deck, a deck that is very fast but relies on bodies to finish people off. So it's definitely that they can use their 0 to drop your life total very quickly with Little Devil, Rage, and Go Wild. You can put down a ridiculous amount of damage and still have your 1 gold open. You know, whether it's for your primary threats or final task back a primary threat. It has 3 lessons learned, so you can rebuy some of your burn. They are the 3 misguide heralds that I guess, would you call them universal, or do you think they're just preferred, or like what's your opinion in Wild Sage? You know, where do misguide heralds fit in Wild Sage? Do you think like if you're not running them, you need a good reason not to? Do you think they're fluid? They can be in, they can be out.
It really kind of comes as a package with surprise attack. By having 3 surprise attack, you kind of really want to go that route just because of the card economy that we were talking about when we were talking about the deck that consistently looked like it wanted to have a full hand. That is really what you're trying to do there when you have that surprise attack and you're able to get the Misguide Herald to allow you to get that card economy up, because not only is the surprise attack replacing itself and allowing you to put that out into play for your opponent's turn, but it's also then netting another body. So you're essentially getting that draw 2 effect by also having 2 bodies in play, one being airborne, one possibly not being airborne, or 2 being airborne, which then gets you into a position where you're going to have the ability to deal more damage, but it also then has the option of having the Bronchiosaurus, which, if let's say you hit the Misguide Herald into the Bronchiosaurus, and then you play the card that you use to replace your surprise attack, that also then has ambush, and being able to really combo off into this kind of crazy one turn. Now, like, basically your opponent may have just wiped the board, they spent their gold, you then recovered in one turn off a surprise attack, and you really didn't expect to hit that, but it has that explosiveness coming out of it. Especially if you hit something like a Draca's Enforcer with the Bronchiosaurus and the Misguide Herald. Now you're talking a ridiculous amount of power on the board, and it really makes those turns where your opponent may have just had to wipe the board last turn to then come back to your turn and be like, well, that board wipe really was ineffective. Let me see what I can do from here.
Out to you. All my thoughts are mostly cards I really like.
You're
How
bouncing in and out there a
much?
little bit.
Sorry, is that better?
Go ahead. No worries.
But it like as the fire body, fire.
No, it's still not picking you up. But I can see that you're going for the Fire Shaman, and if you did have that Fire Shaman in play and you did end up hitting into that surprise attack, into the Bronchiosaurus, into Draca's Enforcer, or into Draca itself, that ability to then have 9 points of damage that you're able to direct how you see fit is definitely an interesting play as well.
Well, it's in play by another is not the worst.
Yeah, we missed everything that you said on that one. For some reason, it's not picking you up on your mic.
You run your thoughts.
No worries. I do feel that it is an interesting deck to continue moving forward with, and it does give a lot of options. So there's a lot that can be said to that, and a lot that can be done with it. And it does look like it has a more direct approach to where it's trying to end up, and because of that, it allows it to move forward a little bit better.
Sorry, that was a technical issue on my part. I have no idea why it kicked out. We're still on the Oaken Shield wild heavy list that's supported with minor evil and minor sage. Uh, the stuff right now we're talking about very quickly, just fire shaman and some of those opportunities you see come in and out. This is one of the lists that runs Go Wild, and I have nothing against Go Wild. I really don't, especially because if you start to view it between the fact of how good it is with Brachiosaur in this list, it's good with Little Devil. You usually want it on a creature that's already evasive. It's pretty good in Shadow Imp decks. But this one seems like it's trying to sneak in its card economy between Go Wild. You have the recycle there. You have the recycle on Flame Spike. So that's why it doesn't have Ancient Chant. Like that sticks out a little bit to me is that it doesn't have an Ancient Chant, but does have Lesson Learned, which is a draw too, but it also lets you get some of your burn back. I like some of these one-ofs, but I think they're there either to confuse or just kind of make things weird, like Entangling Vines. I like that, maybe you get that off a final task and tap down one of their guys and then come swinging for 9. That's kind of funny. It runs a 1 of Rain of Fire, a 1 of Savage Uprising. Only 2 Strafing Dragons catches me. Like I almost feel like if you're running 45 cards of Wild, I probably would have cut something else to make that 3rd Strafing Dragon. But at the same time, they do have reasons for making the cuts the way that they do. Like for example, this list had the 3 Draka Dragon's Tyrant, which might make up for that. It also is running 1 Draka's Fire, which realistically anything Strafing Dragon can do, Draka's Fire can kind of do about the same, if not better. And in this list, because of Lesson Learned, getting 2 uses out of that are pretty good. So real quick, let me just go over Draka's Fire so I can kind of cement my point. For 1 gold, you can either on either player's turn deal 5 damage to each creature and each player, so that's 5 to everybody. Or if it's your turn, deal 5 to just the opposing champions, not the player, and draw a card. If you manage to play it again off, say, Lesson Learned or something like that, that could be rather hectic, especially but also because it doesn't target, it gets around evil using the gudgeon. So, and that's something that for a little while there, those evil heavy control lists, the gudgeon was in all of them because it shut down Thought Plucker, it shut down, Flame Strike, those direct damage ones. So it has a nice ability to get around that stuff. Before we end this episode, let's go through the eighth place list, and we might do some highlights for some of the other ones. What's interesting here is a lot of the players I want to talk about are in this 9 through 14 bracket, so I'll see where we are. But Hamp Use One, I'm assuming I'm probably not pronouncing that properly. This is another. It is 42 cards in Wild, 9 cards in Evil, 9 cards in Sage. I'm trying to see if there's anything that really sticks out as different. I don't want to say better or worse. I just want to say different. This almost seems stock compared to the lists we were talking about before. Your Evil is Drain Essence, Final Task. Your free ones are Rakka's Curse. In Sage, you have Ancient Chant, Wave of Transformation, Amnesia. Actually, I think this is almost a repeat list because it only has a single Draka. It has the Hunting Raptors. It has so this is a repeat list because it has the 2 flags. If it's not a repeat list, it is extremely similar.
Well,
Probably
they
within
increased the hunting raptors up to 3. That seems
yeah.
to
So I
be the
mean, like
big change there.
that seems to be about. And I'm not taking anything from the player, but for the sake of discussing new lists, things to look at, this is within a single percentage point of variation. So maybe we can look at anything else. So while I'm scanning, are there any thoughts you want to have on the top 8 so far, or anything like that?
No, Hempus 1 is definitely already enrolled into the draft for April. So it looks like they have been playing a lot and that they enjoyed this type. So they may just be trying to communicate a list. And I mean, if you are friends with people that are in this type of area where most of these players know each other enough that they've been playing it. And yeah, there might be a few people who've won a golden ticket here or there from winning arenas out of like some unusual case, but that's really kind of like they have basically defined their own meta, which then that own meta will trickle down into what we end up playing whenever you're playing normal constructed or ranked constructed.
So do you want to end it here, or do you want to do some highlight reel?
Oh, we can go through the last couple lists. It's not like there's too much more to go through.
So ninth place, Magnetic. If you've never played, I do not know them personally. In talking with the color and having played against them, Magnetic is a very good player. This is a 4-color, so it's all in control list. In good, you have Avenging Angel, 3 count, Divine Judgment, 2 count, Single Resurrection, 3 Brave Squire. Very interesting mix of cards. Evil, 3 Final Task, 1 Zombie Apocalypse, 2 Wither. That's also a very interesting mix of cards. And then kind of all but a 50-50 split of Wild and Sage, Ancient Chant, Erase, Juggernaut. Knights of Shadow, have not seen that show up yet. There's a Thought Plucker. This is the first list I've seen running Muse. And then in the Wild section, Fires of Rebellion, which I'll circle back to in a second, Kong, Mighty Blow, darn right, Surprise Attack, Go Wild Rage. Why this sticks out? A long time ago, and if you guys check in my deck tech, I nicknamed it the Quickening. It's a fun deck. It's not a great deck. There was Brave Squire. There was Mighty Blow. They predicate on these unchecked threats. You put either of those on your Juggernaut, you put them on your Knight of Shadow, you can even do them on your Thought Plucker. Actually, you should almost effectively definitely put them on your Thought Plucker because it gives it Unbreakable. And if Avenging Angel has tied up their board because you attacked with it last turn, so they don't get their attack, this coming turn, your unblockables of Knight of Shadow and Thought Plucker, if you give them +10 from Mighty Blow, which also gives them Unbreakable, you might lock the game out right then and there. I call this a control list. Now that I'm looking at this is more just a ridiculously aggressive mid-range deck. There's not a lot of pinpoint because it also has Rage. It has Go Wild. It has Kong, I think, just because you're running Surprise Attack, so why wouldn't you run Kong? Fires of Rebellion. It can deal 7 damage to all opposing players, untargeted, gets around the gudgeon. This list is just out there to do the 1-2 punch, and it's there to do it quickly. Because originally I would have given them a little heck for their evil section. Wither, you're just there to probably to take out maybe their Muse, but more realistically, probably to take out whatever tokens get left over possibly from your Zombie Apocalypse, but also just if they're playing a token deck. The 3 final tasks here, combine that with Juggernaut, because if you, on your turn, use final task to get back Juggernaut, it goes to break it at the end of turn. Well, it's unbreakable, so you just got Juggernaut back, period. You go and you bring back Knight of the Shadow. They have to discard a card. You come swing in for an unblockable 9. Pretty good. You have Go Wild. You have Rage. You have Brave Squire. I think this list almost looks like it only takes 3 attacks to have your opponent at 0. This list is not messing around. It might be weak to Kark because it doesn't have the direct damage aspect to it, but I think if your opponent kept a weaker hand, or especially if they're playing tokens and they're not able to mount an offense or they're not able to get rid of an Avenging Angel right away, this looks like it could put people in the ground very quickly.
No, and it's also reinforcing the surprise attack to Misguided Herald kind of as its own little combo package.
Well, but it does also support it because you also have Kong, Knight of Shadow, which you wouldn't mind putting in at the end of turn, Avenging Angel, which I don't think I really would put in at the end of turn unless, and there's the big caveat there, unless I'm trying to attack and play Mighty Blow next turn. Well, in that case, I need as many bodies as possible just so I can use my gold on my turn for Mighty Blow. So here, Mighty Blow looks like it is supporting Surprise Attack in the sense that it makes putting in almost any guy at the end of their turn just one more reason why Mighty Blow is 10 damage.
No, and there's definitely nothing wrong with that. It also looks like it wants to keep its hand filled. You have basically the only tutor in the game with arcane research.
As a 3 count, yeah.
Yeah, so you're able
Well,
to use your arcane research in combination with your ancient chant that may be laying in there, and
it also looks like it's burning cards. I mean, this looks like they're probably playing 2+ cards on a given turn. When they're going in for the attacks, like it really looks like it's looking to empty their hand and empty their opponent's life. That's the way it looks to me. Is that they're not playing around. They have one purpose, and It's basically reverse Kark. Kark just wants to get itself so far out of range. This just looks like it wants to deal like 70 points in 3
it maybe that's what it was built for, but it definitely is something that is interesting. The fact that it branches into all four colors to try and achieve its victory.
Yeah, especially for color aggressive, and I know why I called it control, because really there isn't many 4 color aggressive decks. That definitely is, in the fact that because the one we have on our channel, the Quickening, is a Shadow Imp deck. It pushes that unblockable even more. It has Temporal Enforcer. This just seems to be coming at it from every kind of angle and kind of have stuff. But then if we go down one more to General Jip, played them. I think they definitely have a couple of points on me. As far as the wins, this is another 4 color deck, but this is a more evil centered deck because it has 33 cards are evil, and then 9 from good, 9 from wild, 9 from sage. So obviously this is going off the cards now. I can almost say now it's more it's more control. But it's evil tokens, which for a while there was one of the pillars of the format. It has Xanos, it has Rift Summer, it has Raxa, it has Murderous Necromancer. Now, in the talks I had with the Cutter, and he was kind of explaining that I think it was Tom was saying on one of his live streams, I'm going to have to try and track down some of that stuff. Murderous Necromancer seems like it is mirror match meta tech for evil versus evil. So Murderous Necromancer, 1 gold, 2 power, 6 defense. Loyalty 2, put 3 zombie tokens into play. Expend, there's no way to give this thing blitz. Expend, break target champion, then put a zombie token in play under control. Why this is mirror match tech? If they're not going to immediately play a Raxa to clear out your tokens, you put down this bunch of blockers. It's acceptable versus Wild Sage because of the fact that they have Draka, they have Pyrosaur, they have Flash Fire. They can still clear out those tokens. But having 6 defense means I shouldn't say probably, it is going to cost them at least a gold or 2 cards coming from Wild to take this guy out. And if they can't take it out, it starts chewing up all of their big fat bodies. And, okay, you'll get zombies in return, but this is a better Dark Assassin. The reason is because Dark Assassin only has 2 defense, so it dies to all those things that clear out the zombies. This does not. It has a fatter rear, and it survives more. But you're looking at Demonic Rising. So actually, I'm going to circle back to Demonic Rising in a sec. So we have these token producers. We have 2 Necromancer Lords, but we have 3 Hands from Below, which we talked about way back. 0 cost event, deals 4 damage to each attacking champion without airborne, so maybe these big alpha waves, you can stop them. Put 2 zombie tokens into play. It's a pretty good trade if someone's trying to test the waters and they attack with something small, or if they're attacking with, say, Shadow Imp. You pop it, you get 2 zombies for your turn to kind of fight back. 3 Word of Summoning, it makes a demon, it recycles pretty good. It has Misguided Herald, it has Muse, has Crystal Golem, which is actually, it's not a flex. It's a very good control card, because if you've got nothing better to do on your opponent's turn, putting down a 7/4 untargetable can either be a good blocker, and then you sack it for 2 cards, or it can be a threat. If they decide to go all in and leave themselves open, putting that down can threaten them back. But then, surprisingly, in Wild, you have 3 Hunting Pack, which I know you like, which makes 3 wolves, then all your wolves deal damage to a target champion. So this is both removal and putting tokens out, the same thing as Hands from Below. There's a 3 surprise attack. It has Wolf Spite, so again, it's damage and tokens. So what are we doing with all those tokens? Between Rift Summer, and all those ones. Demonic Rising, 1 gold, draw 2 cards, or break all champions. For each champion broken this way, its controller puts a demon token into play. Demon champions gain Blitz this turn. If you outnumber your opponent's bodies, it doesn't even matter what they are, you play this, or better yet, you can actually cause a second giant wave of attack. If you're battling out, the board's completely clogged up, you attack with a bunch of zombies, they block with their zombies or wolves or whatever, you're down to, 4 guys left on the board, they're down to 1, everything's expended. Well, if you still have your gold, you can then come in for arguably, you obviously everything is destroyed. You could come back in with up to 16 points in that given scenario, and do that. In good, it has Inheritance of the Meek, which banishes all non-token champions. That dovetails. Justice Prevails. Draw 2 cards or draw a card. All your 0 champions gain Righteous, +3 attack, +3 defense. So all your tokens. Urgent Messengers. Draw 2 cards and make 2 tokens. And then just Second Wind, because Second Wind's really good. I like this. I can tell you just from playing decks that are similar to this that were out forever ago and I was testing. This deck has a lot of punch. The problem is when you have to fight those ultra fast wild sage decks or wild evil decks or whatever. This does have the ability to regain health, but it is very focused on being a token based strategy across 4 colors. Good and bad. It does still have Xanos, so you can take some life points off of them, make your token army. Especially if you surprise attack. If you surprise attack Xanos at the end of their turn, and then on your turn, you have either Justice Prevails or Demonic Rising, you can put their lights out. There's a lot of cool stuff that can happen with this list. I like this list. I think this would be a blast to play in free range. I don't know if I would take this into a top tier event. I'm sure it is a ton of fun to play.
No, and if that's exactly what you're looking to do, and you're not looking at it as this is what I want to deal with, or I just want to go for the win, you may know the players that you're playing against and what they're kind of playing, and you may not have the best deck already set up, but you are running something that is a threat, a fun to play, and if you place higher, you may win your ticket back, and people may not be expecting this deck to be there.
I would definitely not expect this deck. Because most of the time when you see token decks, they're usually of the human variety. Now, there are demon decks, the ones that run like Rax's Displeasure to destroy all non-demon. To see a demonic rising strategy, obviously it exists. We all have access to the same number of cards, but it is very cool to see a 4-color commitment to a token strategy. It has some removal, but apparently every piece of removal leaves behind some tokens. It's got some really cool ideas, and I'm glad they were able to make this tournament with this deck because it's now immortalized. It's like, hey, if you feel like you got the skill, or if you want to play something wacky that does have some cool ways this is an overrun token style that once it starts churning, it can be an unstoppable engine. But I feel like you can make this engine hiccup quite a few times depending on what you're playing. I can just say from playing this, could this thing be favored against Wild Sage? Yes, but the problem is you don't know which version of Wild Sage, which brings us literally to our next list, Porky Lorky. It is I really want to try and stay away from saying a stereotypical deck, but it's 42 wild cards, 18 sage cards. We're back to 2 colors, which is fine. But when it comes to your sage, you have Ancient Chant, you erase, Misguided Herald. There's Thought Plucker, which arguably, with the way the rest of this list goes, it's just a draw engine. That's all it is. It's not a damage engine or anything like that. Amnesia, Force Major Apprentice, which pinpoint damage is cool. And, there's Feeding Frenzy to go with the Force Major Apprentice, and there are 2 Hunting Raptors to go with it. So it feels like they really like Feeding Frenzy. And a lot of this deck is like, I think if I had to name this deck, I would call it Feeding Frenzy deck, because there are so many ways to deal pinpoint damage with this deck. There's Scaros, Draka, because obviously Draka followed by Feeding Frenzy to clear out, any airborne blockers. It's got some good hits. I think. Well, actually, let me ask you what you think, because most of what I'm going to say is it looks good and it's there. That's most of what I'm saying about the list.
No, it is definitely one of those things where it's also looking and it's going back to the surprise attack combo package of having the Mist Herald with the surprise attack there to have that combo trick kind of going since you're already in those Kellers. But it's also then looking to kind of wipe your opponent's board or have that ability to be able to really just continuously put damage on your opponent on their turn. So you may be able to block with your Hunting Raptors or have them sit there and be a threat, but also be able to tap them after blocking or whenever it's coming down to the end of turn, and they're like, well, I can throw another 4 damage on you. I can throw another 2 damage with Force Mage. I can maybe reset it if I'm going to play an Erase, and then continue to keep these combos kind of in favor of your position by refilling your hand, putting cards back into your hand that will eventually trigger again. So being able to erase your own Kong if there's a big threat on the board that you need to take care of, and then also being able to reset Force Mage Apprentice or making sure that you're getting that damage in on your opponent and not really having to deal so much combat damage to them directly.
Well, but then list in the 12th place, Sir 3. It honestly, I can't tell the difference between Porky Lurky and Sir. They share the same source. It looks like the same. EPI cat. I'm not sure it's Epic Cat. I don't know. I'm looking through, and it is a you'll pre. So pull up Epic Cat. It is 60 cards, all wild. That is awesome. Like, because in this game there is almost no penalty to being multicolor, even if it's splash 9 cards, splash 6 cards, whatever. They said, nah, we're only doing aggro. It has a single lightning storm, which makes me happy. It runs like all of the zeros. You have Feeding Frenzy, Fire Shaman, Flame Spike, Flash Fire, Lash, Spore Beast, Wolf Spike. I think literally they just said, what are the cards that do a ton of damage, and here it is. But the downside, if anyone is taking up those, what are they called? Quest challenge. I keep calling. Are they called quest decks? The quests.
I can go look real quick here.
No, it doesn't matter. Anyway, the ones that are like, hey, play an all evil deck 3 times or whatever. This would qualify for play an all wild deck. You have no gas. Not in the sense you don't have aggro. You have no ability to refill your hand. When what's ironic here, for an all wild deck, it only runs 2 Brachiosaurus. I'm like, of all decks, this one should be running like 7 Brachiosaurus, but it's only running 2. So it's cool to see this. I can see you emptying your hand, going from your 5 cards, even if you're using those 0 cost events to draw 2 or whatever. I can see you going from a full grip to an empty grip in 2 turns, and a Kark list would eat this thing alive. Just from experience, I've played very heavy wild decks before. If I can get your hand down to 1 or 0 cards, and especially some of these other decks that run Thought Plucker, if you burn yourself down and we take your last card or your second to last card and you're left living off the top of your deck, you are going to be dealt with. I mean, you have to have such a board presence. Yes, it has smashing, but I mean, there are cards that you play, you get 1 card back. Smash and Burn at least gets you 2. Feeding Frenzy can get you 2. Flame Spike, Wolf Spike, Recycle, and Lash at least has recall. But you're going to empty your hand. If your opponent is not dead by the time you empty your hand, you're not going to survive when they recover. And that's just my opinion. I'm very happy someone played this, but I can also see why it's down here, on 13th on this list, just because I don't think any pure list has the punch. You don't have the diversity to do so. But that's just my opinion. And there is someone down here at the end, Crocmaster. I'm going to just talk about it very briefly. They have 0 points for wins. but I'm looking at it, and it's very confusing to me. I mean, it's a Kark list because Chamberlain Kark's in there. So if we want to really, call it that, it splashes for 3 evil cards, 2 Drain Essence, 1 Heinous Feast, 6 Sage cards, one single Force Field, 3 Thought Plucker, 2 Amnesia, and I'm gonna rope that into the same problem we had with Epicat. It doesn't have the draw engine to stay in business. Even it's in Sage, and it doesn't run Ancient Chant. Now, obviously, Ancient Chant's not the end all be all. It does have Thought Plucker. It does have a bunch of events that can go and be played for 2 cards. But you're playing a card deck. You need answers. You need cards in hand. You need to be versatile. This doesn't have the ability to do so. I know without talking with the player themselves, it has a very good, the list looks generalized because it does have Angel of Mercy, which is one of those things. Angel of Mercy, I think, is an underappreciated card, but at the same time, Angel of Mercy depends on the discard pile. It can only pull back good champions, so it can be handled. Especially if you kill their Angel of Mercy, well, they some of their deck is clearly built around Angel of Mercy, much more so than say Surprise Attack. Because it refers specifically to good champions in the discard at the beginning of your turn. There's a lot of comma, comma, comma. There's a lot of caveats to making this card amazing, and it's only a 4/5 flyer, meaning there are 0 cost removal spells that can take this thing out quite easily. And costing 1 gold and dying to 0 without having an immediate effect is not one of the better things, in my opinion.
No, it also is that if, let's say, this is the last card in your hand or the last creature in your hand, and they're running Graveyard Hate, not specifically because of you, but if you're in that dependent on having a body in the graveyard for this to then combo off and get you that extra gold effect, if you don't have anything there, it just ends up being a 4/5 ambusher that you kind of put in on their turn, and it has no other effect. So it really ends up hitting you really hard at, like, I just needed a body to block effect rather than having that effect that could have been more useful and more reaching as far as getting the game back into your favor. It's kind of like a win more card.
I would definitely agree with that. So give me a couple of your thoughts on the overall. I want to do an actual body count for how many Wild Sage decks or decks I'll say are or Wild Sage that are splashes.
Looking at Wild Sage, it looks like it's thinned down a little bit into being about, like, I'd probably say half to 60%. So you're talking like
Yeah,
6 to 8.
yeah. I mean, so if we're actually taking the list here, there are 3 Kark lists. Now, mind you, one of them has 0 points. So, take that for what it's worth. Wild is absolutely one of the most represented majorities in decks. There are almost every deck here has a very strong position of Wild. Uh, I mean, obviously, these 4-color decks can kind of go one way or the other, but they have a majority of their cards in Wild. I don't think that is entirely the metagame, but the things we're not seeing, and I definitely want to get another perspective. Someone, if we want to call someone a pro, I want to get one of their perspectives for all this. We do not have a good evil deck. There are decks that are evil that have good in them, but there's no like dedicated resurrection / final task. Army of the Apocalypse deck. I didn't see any Army of the Apocalypse actually, cards by name in that. We are we are seeing Wild Sage slow down, but that's also somewhat due to the fact of how Kark is adapting to beating them. I also think sometimes people just get nauseous of Wild Sage on Wild Sage because sometimes it does come down to a coin flip. My Draka attacks into your Draka. Do they have Feeding Frenzy because that's a pretty good thing on my turn, but the card's really bad on your turn. I don't see a lot of these Uh, well, I don't see a lot of Shadow Imp decks. Now, obviously, I say that and it's like, well, the first place guy had Shadow Imp, but it doesn't feel like Shadow Imp decks are heavily represented here. I don't see the Dragon deck, but then again, that's not really. I'm beginning to think that's a figment of my imagination. I mean, Tat Daddy is definitely the closest to the Dragon deck. Wild Evil Blitz style decks, no show, zero blood drinkers, so there is no combo fin. Um, I'm trying to think what other sort of pillars that we can like nail off the like good tokens. There isn't a very heavy emphasis on human tokens. There's it's because there are some really awesome ones that are like, hey, make 6 humans, or all human tokens get blitz and indestructible. I'm like, you can end people out of anywhere. These good base decks, good always seems to be in the supporting role unless it's Kark, which again, there's nothing wrong with that, but just observations. I'm glad there are a couple of quirky, 3 and 4 color decks that have some fun. I do like that there are some decks I would not have seen, excuse me, show up. The fact that Deadly Raid got into first place, the fact that it ran Resurrection, but also at the same time, who's to say that that really is the best deck? He's a very good player, and I would have a hard time pigeonholing what his deck was doing. And having played it today, it's it's not a pick up and play deck. You definitely need your time in getting that deck right. Are the numbers right? I couldn't tell you. I can definitely tell you that it's a very hard to predict deck. It's a I don't know the mulligans on that deck that well. It's very hard to deal with. But then for you to have 2 Kark players in place 3 and place 4 in a sea of Wild Sage, to me, if I was reading this strictly by the numbers, it seems to say Wild Sage is waning a little bit, but a good Kark player can still triumph over them. That's the way I'm reading these results. And there was a slight showing of Xanos. That's cool. There weren't these very aggressive, blitz Sage decks with like Veldin and stuff like that. Those didn't show up. Skaros did make a couple showing. That accelerated wild deck is I would definitely keep an eye on that. That's really cool. But some of these fringe archetypes, they're fringe archetypes for a reason, in my opinion. They have linchpin strategies, and if you know where to put your pressure on them, they lose. Like no human tokens, wild evil decks. Well, at that point, why don't you throw in a splash sage or lower one of those counts and throw more sage in there and just kind of join the party? That feels that way. No blood drinker combos, and that's not the worst, but no blood drinker combos. No Army of the Apocalypse decks, as I was saying. So it you can see that there was a lower amount of discard hate. Do you feel that's representative of something, or are we just looking at a bubble where people don't care about these discard based strategies?
What it's really looking like is that of the 5, let's say, pillar types of having aggro, having tempo, having mid range, having control, and having combo, that everybody kind of really focused in on that mid range tempo style of the 2 decks really playing against each other. You're not seeing a really heavy aggressive deck in there that basically only wins in the first 3 turns. You're not seeing
Well,
a
there were
really
there were
heavy
there were
control.
two, but they didn't place that high though. I mean, because we take that really awesome one from Magnetic, and I'm like, yeah, this thing's pretty fast, and you do have the accelerated wild. Uh, so we if we want to make an argument, there are only 2 aggro decks that made a showing in about 14 decks from some obviously prominent players.
No, definitely is there, but it really feels like that you're not seeing any kind of really heavy control decks. You're not seeing any of the combo decks like you're saying. Very small on the aggro, so it's more into tempo versus mid range slash late game. And it really does look like that the tempo just had the upper edge for this month. Considering that if you go back and look, you can see that there have been decks that were Kark winning, which is just trying to go for that more mid to late game of just comboing off and having that win of 60 light, which isn't necessarily a combo in that it's just using the effect and the alternate win condition that's in the game and making the game simpler to play. So it has that advantage.
No, I can see that. I'm trying to think of where I want to lead this question because I like had a brain fart for a moment. But do you feel that this represents that there is a healthy metagame to be had? Do you feel like this tournament is, uh, I guess I would say, more of an exclusive? Because obviously this is not what we're seeing out in the field. I see some of this in the field. I still see a ton of Wild Sage. I still see a good representation of Sage with Splash Evil or just under half Evil. I've run it quite a few times. It has some good pairings. It's not great against Wild Sage, but it's good against a lot of other things. Do you feel that this representation is something people can draw conclusions from, or do you feel like it represents itself and only itself?
I feel that there are a lot of conclusions you can draw in that when you're looking at this, this is what you need to be able to kind of deal with. And it gives you that idea range of that if you're going into the control meta or if you're going into the combo meta, here's a good picture of what kind of decks are going to be thrown at you and what you need to be able to beat. So it would be kind of surprising to not see a control deck out of one player in the next tournament for May. And it would almost be a little bit if that combo gets ironed out into a way that it can kind of win out of nowhere, that you wouldn't see that combo deck or a couple combo decks come up as well. But
Well, the biggest thing with the Drinker of Blood combo is it's extremely fragile. You need the board to be sitting out there so that you can Zombie Apocalypse or Wave of Transformation one of the turn, then the next turn put a Blood Drinker in, and then a Wither or Flash Fire takes it all out. So you're talking 3 cards over the course of 2 turns, which clearly need to be in your hand, and you also need a board that's relatively bloated.
no, and you're seeing that you can kind of get there as a lot of the decks are moving away from board wipes. So while Kark still has it, and Kark might not be your favorable matchup, if you're giving up 2 Kark, then to have that win against 80% of the meta then out there because of the remainder not running the board wipes to really deal with what you're doing, you're kind of putting yourself into a more favorable position by having that rock, paper, scissors kind of effect when you know that more often than not people are throwing the rock and you're going to end up being the paper, but that scissors meta of Kark is still out there.
No, I can definitely see that. I know veterans would they've already drawn their own conclusions. I think for any of the newer players, one of the hardest things is you're going to be getting so tired of seeing Draka and Strafing Dragon, but they're only 6 cards of 60 in a deck. We've seen these lists that will still run those, but they're 3 color, they're 4 color. They just happen to be in lists because they fit the narrative. Such as Draka really is. It's a conditional card for when it's good, but when it's really good, it's crushing a bunch of small guys or it's following up a Wave of Transformation for a one-sided board wipe. Okay, but I can definitely tell you, if you're not planning on seeing Strafing Dragon, apparently you haven't been playing this game for more than 2 days because Strafing Dragon is everywhere. But there are still some areas that aren't being represented that can be represented. I don't know if it requires an expansion. It just requires other lines of thought because our discussion with the Cutter, our hopefully future discussions with some other players, there are still ideas out there to be had. The problem just is, are the ideas, the changes in strategy going to be able to overcome a majority of the field, or are they also so complicated that they don't, I guess, win as much? Because you were just talking about, Kark versus, say, Drinker of Blood. Well, that's one of the worst matchups, because if they can keep their life total out of range, Drinker of Blood can't. Whereas, other mid-range ones that are like, oh, I'm going to smash you down with a steel golem. I'm going to smash you down with a steel golem. You're hitting them for 13. You can eventually get there. Brandon and I had a very entertaining. He was playing Kark. I was playing this Sage tempo deck Splash Evil, and I probably dealt him probably over 200 points, and he still eventually did get the Kark win. But it wasn't dealing damage in big enough chunks, and I wasn't, even though I was able to keep him off the Kark win several times, eventually I ran out of the ability to deal damage directly to him. And if you skip 2 turns of dealing enough chunks of damage, which I'd probably say is like 8 plus, if you can't deal 8 plus each turn over 2 consecutive turns, Kark will have a way to seal the game up with a Kark win. And since this game has no way of preventing Kark from showing up, that's a problem. But, I still think it's a very healthy showing. I'm very happy that the diversity that's there. I look forward to other players playing these decks, but I know from playing Tom's deck today, and I've ran into a few mirror matches because I saw Surprise Attack, I saw Angel the Gate, I saw Deadly Raid all in the same deck. I'm like, haha, you too, found out these tournament results. But it was very fun to go with you and get your thoughts on some of these things. I'm happy that we have the results. I just hope, we get them on the website sooner than not. And I understand they have a lot of stuff going on, especially with where we are at in this world. I'm well aware of how hard some of these things are, but at least we have access to them in the app.
No, it is definitely nice to see it in the app, and since the app was technically just re-released, where the alpha was basically wiped, everybody got back what they had for the Kickstarter for this beta edition of what they're technically calling it, uh, where you can see this continuing just as it is out of beta and basically like, hey, we're just full release and nothing really changing. It is nice to have those decks, especially where you can export it and basically
Yeah,
take it and just go play. You're not trying to guess, let me look at the website on my phone. Okay, that's this card, and then having those small mistakes. But it also gives you a place to build and play off of it and go, well, I see that there's a few problems here. Maybe I can improve it by changing what I'm playing.
yeah, and I think that's a good place for us to end all this. I am happy we're able to talk about this, and I would like to get some more. We'll use the term pro, basically just people better than us. People better than us. I'd like to get their feedback. I'm very hopeful when people can still surprise us. Between the Pedro's Accelerated Wild deck, and I understand I'm just putting terms out there, but between that deck, Tom's deck, Tat Daddy's deck, the fact that Kark had 2 high place showings, and that Demonic Rising 4-color deck, I'm very happy we got to still get surprised. That's it's like when you play chess and you have so many expected openings. Well, when people do rogue openings, you go, oh, well, they just know what they're doing. But if you lose to a rogue opening, you go, oh, there might still be some strategies I can learn from in this game, and that's cool.
No, it definitely
But,
is that there's strategies, there's card combinations that really haven't been overly represented, where they may have been played before, but they aren't overwhelmingly shown as like, hey, you need to see this and constantly have to deal with it. So it is a nice idea to have it there. And also being able to play it or see it being played and having a good idea. Another thing to look at is going back through the rounds. You do end up seeing that Atlanta did play WWW, so you had Kark versus Kark, which is that racing mirror match, and WWW ended up winning it. So it is quite possible that those few changes to have that mirror match win is really what sealed the deal there.
yeah, definitely so. Well, let's end there because I know we've been a little long in the tooth, but It's definitely been probably one of the more fun episodes because we at least have up to date results.
Oh,
And because
exactly. Having something that's so fresh as opposed to having to go back and research and not be able to see how even the tournament bracket broke down. It's nice to see who played who, how the wins went, and how you can see those decks playing out against each other.
well, especially that this is open as opposed to the alpha closed release and everything else. The fact that this was access to all the players. This wasn't just the Kickstarter backers or those they allowed private access. This is a public opportunity. So anyway, let's end there. I'll let you do your outro.
Definitely. And if you are one of these players that has been in these tournaments and you do want to feel free to reach out to us, we'd definitely like to talk with you, have you on the podcast maybe. It's all up to you if that's where you're at, but feel free to leave us a message, talk to us. But like, share, subscribe. Bring your enemies, bring your friends. That way you can learn a little bit more with your friends. You can beat the enemies that you have, or you can have us beat them for you. But definitely thank you guys for your time and thank you for listening.